Russia pumps 9 million barrels of crude oil every single day, making it the third largest oil producer on Earth. And yet, right now, more than 50 million Russians are living under fuel restrictions. Lines stretch for miles at filling stations across the country, and one man in the Siberian city of Chita sat in a queue for 39 hours just to fill his tank. This is Russia's biggest fuel crisis in modern history. And it was triggered not by sanctions, not by a market collapse, but by a fleet of Ukrainian drones that most experts said would never work. To understand how we got here, we need to go back to late 2023. That's when Kyiv made a strategic decision that would reshape the entire war. Ukraine lacked the Western long-range missiles it had been requesting for months. NATO allies were reluctant to provide weapons that could strike deep inside Russian territory. So Ukraine did what it has done repeatedly throughout this conflict. It improvised. Ukrainian engineers began building their own fleet of long-range attack drones, cheap, expendable, and capable of flying hundreds of kilometers into Russia. Their target wasn't the front line. It was the infrastructure behind it, specifically the oil refineries that convert Russia's vast crude reserves into the gasoline, diesel, and jet fuel that power its military machine and its civilian economy. The early strikes were tentative. A handful of facilities hit, modest damage, and Russian state media barely acknowledged them. But Ukraine was learning with every attack. Flight paths were refined, payloads were adjusted, targeting improved. By the spring and summer of 2024, Ukraine launched its first sustained campaign against Russian refining capacity. It caused disruption, certainly, but Russia managed to absorb the blows. Repairs were made. Production dipped but recovered. Moscow treated the strikes as a nuisance, not a crisis. That changed in August 2025. What happened that month was not a nuisance. It was an onslaught. Ukraine carried out over a dozen drone attacks on Russian oil infrastructure in just 22 days, between August 2nd and August 24th. The majority struck facilities in Ryazan Oblast and Volgograd Oblast, two of the most critical refining regions in western Russia. On August 27th, a powerful explosion rocked the Ryazan refinery, one of the main fuel arteries supplying Moscow itself. That same day, Russia took a step it had never taken before. It suspended all exports of gasoline. Not reduced, suspended entirely until September 30th. For a country whose entire geopolitical identity is built on being an energy superpower, this was an extraordinary admission of weakness. And the hits kept coming. On August 30th, Ukrainian drones struck the Krasnodar refinery, which produces around 3 million tons of gasoline, diesel, and aviation fuel annually, and the Syzran plant, capable of processing up to 8.5 million tons per year. By September, fuel shortages had spread from the initial strike zones into the Volga region, southern Russia, and central Russia. Forbes reported that the situation was worsening fast, with rising prices, rationing, long queues, and pumps running dry across the country. Independent oil and gas analyst Boris Aronstein called it the most severe crisis in recent years, pointing out something critical about why this campaign was different from everything that came before. The size, coordination, and repeated waves of the drones made it impossible for Russia to repair refineries before the next attack hit. That's the key insight here. It's not just about destroying capacity, it's about preventing recovery. Every time Russian engineers began fixing a damaged distillation unit, another wave of drones would arrive. The repair cycle was broken. By October 2025, the BBC reported that 21 out of Russia's 38 large refineries had been struck since the start of the year. On paper, Russia can refine 327 million tons of oil annually, roughly 6.5 million barrels per day. The 16 refineries attacked just in August and September alone accounted for 123 million tons of that capacity. 38% of the total. And here's where the crisis entered a new and far more dangerous phase. Through late 2025 and into early 2026, Ukraine's drone technology kept evolving. The drones could fly further. They carried bigger payloads. They attacked more frequently. Russian officials and analysts emphasized this repeatedly. The situation in 2026 was far more serious than anything that came before, precisely because the weapons had gotten better. On April 1st, 2026, Russia imposed a full ban on gasoline exports. Not temporary, not partial, full. By May, refining output had dropped below 4 million barrels per day. Then June arrived, and the crisis deepened sharply. Larger numbers of longer-range Ukrainian drones began striking targets deep inside Russia. On June 18th, a Ukrainian drone attack caused a fire at the Moscow refinery in Kapotnya, inside the capital itself. The symbolism was impossible to ignore. The war had arrived at Moscow's doorstep, quite literally. On June 25th, President Zelensky approved what was described as a 40-day pressure operation, a sustained campaign designed to maximize the impact on Russian energy infrastructure. The very next day, Russian-installed authorities in occupied Crimea declared a state of emergency. Fuel shortages, combined with power cuts from strikes on the energy grid, had made the peninsula nearly unlivable. Satellite photographs from Planet Labs taken on June 24th revealed more than 10 kilometers of vehicle queues before the Kerch Bridge, roughly 1,500 cars, all trying to flee Crimea. 4 days later, something remarkable happened. Vladimir Putin publicly acknowledged the fuel crisis for the first time. Speaking on June 29th, he said, "As for strikes against critical infrastructure in general, and energy infrastructure in particular, of course, these attacks on our infrastructure facilities create problems. That's obvious." He then added, "Right now we're observing a certain shortage, but it's not critical." Not critical. Let's look at what the actual data showed. By early July, Russian refineries were meeting only about 65% of seasonal petrol demand. The country was consuming between 115,000 and 120,000 tons of petrol per day, but domestic production covered just 2/3 of that. The daily shortfall was running at 40 to 45,000 tons. That's 1.2 to 1.35 million tons of missing fuel every single month. By July 2026, Novaya Gazeta Europe estimated that the fuel crisis had spread to at least 78 of Russia's 83 internationally recognized regions, plus occupied Crimea and Sevastopol. Only 5 regions had not reported a crisis. More than 90% of all Russian regions had introduced some form of rationing or reported shortages. 50 million people, roughly 35% of the entire Russian population, were living under fuel restrictions. According to Gallup polling released in late June, 60% of Russians said economic conditions were getting worse, the highest level recorded in 2 decades of surveys. Not critical, Putin said. Then came July 6th. Ukrainian drones struck the Omsk oil refinery in western Siberia. This was not just another refinery, this was Russia's largest. Omsk processes more than 22 million tons of crude oil annually and accounts for roughly 10% of the country's total refining capacity. It's owned by Gazprom Neft, one of Russia's most important energy companies, and it sits nearly 2,500 kilometers from Ukrainian territory, making it one of the deepest strikes Kyiv had ever achieved. The attack damaged 2 primary processing units. CDU-10, which handles about 38% of the plant's production, caught fire. CDU-11, accounting for another 37%, was also taken offline. In a single night, 75% of Russia's largest refinery was knocked out. 2 days later, on July 8th, Russian authorities banned diesel fuel exports. The country was now unable to export either gasoline or diesel. For the world's third largest oil producer, this was an almost inconceivable position to be in. But Ukraine wasn't finished. Between July 7th and July 11th, Ukrainian forces launched a massive campaign against Russian tankers in the Sea of Azov. More than 40 tankers were attacked. In a single overnight operation on July 11th, Ukrainian drones recorded 73 successful strikes against 21 tankers and 7 other vessels. Russia was forced to suspend civilian shipping through the Don Azov shipping canal and the Kerch Strait entirely. Robert Brovdy, the commander of Ukraine's unmanned systems forces, known by his call sign Magyar, offered a blunt assessment. "The shadow tanker fleet is noticeably shrinking," he said. Then he added 2 words that ricocheted through Russian media: Moscow will fall. Perhaps the single most revealing detail of this entire crisis is what happened next. Facing a fuel shortfall it couldn't close domestically, Russia began importing gasoline from India. But not just any gasoline. Russia was buying back fuel refined from its own crude oil. Here's how it works. Russia sells crude to India at a discount. That crude arrives at the Nayara energy refinery in Vadanar, Western India, a plant that is 49% owned by Rosneft, a Russian state-controlled oil giant that is itself under EU sanctions. The crude is refined into gasoline, and then that gasoline is shipped 14,000 kilometers back to Russia at a premium. The trade loses money, and the Russian state covers the gap. An oil superpower importing fuel made from its own oil, shipped halfway around the world and back, at a loss. It's hard to imagine a more complete illustration of strategic failure. The problems compound in ways that aren't immediately obvious, too. International sanctions have made it extremely difficult for Russia to obtain the specialized equipment needed to repair its damaged refineries. These aren't simple facilities. Modern oil refineries are enormously complex industrial plants that rely on precision components, many of which were historically sourced from Western manufacturers. Without those parts, repairs drag on for months. Analysts estimate that even after production resumes at damaged facilities, it will take more than a year for them to return to pre-war productivity levels. At the Kirishi, Tuapse, Samara, and Syzran refineries, processing had stopped entirely. The crisis also forced a quality compromise with its own cascading consequences. Russian authorities signed a decree allowing certain refineries to lower their production standards from Euro 5 gasoline to Euro 3. This is fuel with significantly higher sulfur content, and it damages modern engines. Nowhere is this more consequential than in agriculture. In Russia's southern grain belt, farmers were forced onto this lower-grade fuel, and by early July, the harvest was running 3 times behind the previous year's pace. A fuel crisis was becoming a food crisis. The General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine reported that systematic strikes had taken 42.74% of Russian oil refining capacity out of service, with industry losses reaching $13.5 billion. The Financial Times put the numbers even higher, reporting that Ukrainian attacks shut down more than 30% of actual capacity and more than 45% of nominal capacity. By June 2026, Russia was producing just 4.1 million barrels of refined product per day, 28% below the 5-year average and 35% below design capacity. The economic ripple effects extend far beyond the pump. The Bank of Russia identified rising gasoline prices as a risk to inflation, which hit 6% in late June, well above the central bank's 4% target. The government quietly lowered its 2026 economic growth forecast to just 0.4%. Putin's approval ratings slipped to around 73 to 74%, which by Russian standards, where he had historically enjoyed ratings above 80%, represents a meaningful decline. There are small signs of stabilization. Deputy Prime Minister Alexander Novak told reporters in late July that the situation is gradually stabilizing, with some refineries returning to operation. On July 28, the Omsk region became the first to lift all limits on petrol and diesel sales. Russia also announced plans to import around 400,000 tons of gasoline per month from Belarus and other sources. But Novak himself acknowledged the picture remains strained, particularly in Siberia, and the gasoline export ban was extended through the end of 2026, a clear signal that Moscow sees no quick resolution. Zelensky summarized Ukraine's strategic logic in characteristically direct terms. "We have long proposed that Russia end this war," he said, "and every day of delay should bring the feeling of war to where it all began, to Russia." What we're witnessing is something that military strategists have theorized about for decades, but rarely seen executed at this scale. A smaller, technologically innovative nation systematically dismantling the economic backbone of a much larger adversary, not through conventional military superiority, but through persistent, low-cost, asymmetric attacks on critical infrastructure. Ukraine is spending a fraction of what Russia spends on air defense, yet it's inflicting billions in damage and creating a crisis that touches the daily lives of tens of millions of ordinary Russians. The world's third-largest oil producer cannot fuel its own gas stations. It's importing its own oil back from India at a loss. Its harvest is failing because its tractors are running on degraded fuel. Its citizens are waiting in lines that stretch for days. Its occupied territories are declaring states of emergency. And the drones keep coming, flying further, hitting harder, and striking with greater precision than ever before. This is Russia's fuel crisis. And by every available measure, it is far from over.